Hey everybody, welcome to day 5 of our 8-part series of triathlon terms for beginners. Today we're going to be talking about running, and while we talk about running, there's a number of items we're going to get to here today. Some of them you may have heard before, probably some you haven't, especially if you're new to triathlon. So again, if I've misspoke about anything, any of these terms, or you think I've got it wrong, please leave me a comment, let me know. We'll figure it out together. I do know people in high places who do have the actual definitions of these things, so I can always get the right answer, but I think I'm on the right track here. So let's just dive right into this today. We're going to be talking about running terms, and the first running term is, what's a negative split? Well, a negative split is when, if you look at the race that you're running or the training session that you're doing as two halves of a whole, the first half is the first half, that's your split time. The second half is your second split time. And if you run the second half faster than you ran the first half, that's called a negative split. So I don't really know. If that's something I don't think I've ever trained to have a negative split. As a matter of fact, I don't even think I've tracked that metric, but it is something that the pros use as a metric to understand if their second half of their marathon is faster than the first. And I think they train specifically to do that, but it's not something that as a beginner you're ever going to have to worry about. This is just what the term is. Cadence, we talked about that in cycling, and cadence, same thing with running. You know, whether you're turning your legs over on a bike or you're turning your legs over as you run. My cadence is typically around 80 for both. If you're a younger runner with maybe fresher legs, you might have a higher cadence, maybe closer to 90. But cadence is just how many revolutions per minute your feet are turning over on the ground while you're running. Stride rate, and this is also the number of strides or steps that you take in a minute. So I'm not quite sure, when you think about cadence and stride rate, really what the difference is. It says here, here's the actual definition. Stride or cadence, number of steps per minute taken while running. Stride rate, number of steps a runner takes per minute. Kind of the same thing. If you know what the difference is, let me know in the comments. I'm literally taking this from the guidebook, and they sound exactly the same to me. So cadence and stride rate, I think, are pretty much the same thing. Brick legs, we talked about this earlier, and when you do a brick workout, we talked about this in our first video. This is kind of triathlon terminology, but brick legs are when your legs are feeling very heavy and fatigued. And it's a specific part of training. You'll do a brick run, a 20-minute brick run after a hard bicycling session. You'll do that typically on Tuesdays if you're following a periodized training plan, because you've got to give your body the appropriate amount of recovery time for your next workout. And Wednesday will be a sort of a tough run day for you. So you're not doing a long run, you're doing a brick run. And the whole point of that brick run is, again, to train your body to feel what it feels like to run on rubbery legs or legs that feel like bricks. The next term is glycogen depletion. So glycogen is the available blood sugar in our bloodstream that our body uses as fuel for about the first hour of exercise. And if you're just training for an hour, you don't have to worry about restoring your glycogen on the race course. But if you're out there doing a half Ironman or a full Ironman, and you're out there anywhere from 5 to 17 hours of exercise, you've got to replenish that glycogen store in your body somehow. And you get that through gels and through things like Coca-Cola on the run course. You're getting immediate sugar that's in a liquid form that breaks up through the stomach wall and immediately becomes present as a fuel source for your body. Because at an elevated fitness level, when you're doing an endurance sport for hours at a time, the way that I understand it is that your body actually burns up lean muscle mass before it will target fat for fuel, because when your body's working at that elevated state, it's the path of least resistance. It's easier to cannibalize lean muscle mass than to convert fat to fuel. So that's why you want to introduce a new fuel source that isn't cannibalizing your lean muscle mass. And that's why, something that's liquid goes straight through your stomach wall. It can be great for an endurance athlete, but not great for you if you're leading a sedentary lifestyle and just having this as a casual beverage. All right, fuel belt. Your fuel belt is what a runner uses to carry their liquids, their gels, any salt tabs that you have, any toilet paper that you might be carrying with you. I'm going to do a video on a fuel belt and all the things that I carry. and some great new advancements they've made in fuel belts and the water bottles in particular, and how to fill up your water bottle with Coca-Cola so it doesn't explode into your back. I'll be covering all of that as well. But your fuel belt is essentially what you're wearing around your waist, and it's got your reserve fuels. You use it as an actual training piece of equipment while you're training for the race, but on race day, the whole point of your fuel belt is there for emergencies. And when I did Ironman Cozumel, and I started having severe muscle cramping in my legs, that meant that I was in sodium depletion. I was between aid stations. I wasn't getting enough sodium to keep my body moving forward. My body was starting to shut down, and cramping is the first sign that your body is shutting down. I had in my fuel belt, because I was prepared, salt tablets, and I'll show you what those are when I do my story about the fuel belt. But I had salt tablets, and I had Coca-Cola, and I had water, and being able to take the tablets and have something to wash them down, that was my backup. That was my reserve in case I had a problem, and that saved the day. That allowed me to still have a personal best finish in that race, even though I got slowed down by half an hour because of the cramping situation. So a fuel belt is what you'll use to carry your nutrition and carry your fuels for longer training runs, but it's what you use for backup on race day. Fartlek. This is a fun one. People don't know what a fartlek is. Well, if you don't know what a fartlek is and you've never heard that term before, if you live in an area like Florida where it's flat, or Cozumel, Mexico, where it's flat, or anywhere in the world where it's flat, and you don't have hills or bridges that you can do hill training on, a fartlek is simply, think of telephone poles. You're going to sprint from one telephone pole to the next and then jog lightly for the next 2 telephone poles. Sprint, then jog lightly. And you're going to repeat that process for maybe 10 repeats. That is like a HIIT workout, high intensity, followed by a quick recovery. That is what you will do to train your legs for anaerobic endurance and a little bit of strength training when you're living in an area that's flat. I'm fortunate. I have the Niagara Escarpment literally at my doorstep, and I can do hill repeats on very, very large hills that are very much like running in the mountains. And I can tell you, when I was doing Ironman Mont Tremblant, they had 2 hills on the course. One was on the run and one was on the bike. I literally have a 12% gradient hill right beside my house that I do rides on. And the guys at the race course were talking all about this 11% hill and how hideous and disastrous it was. And I'm like, guys, I ride on a 12% every day. So like this is not going to be uncommon for me. And then I run on that. So there were, on the run course, I had to do this one hill twice on Mont Tremblant. If you've ever done it, you know which one I'm talking about. It's the one that's running into the village. And if you've ever done Ironman Muskoka recently, as soon as you get off the bike and down to the run, immediately you're going up a hill at 10% grade. For like it's like, why did they do this to us? We just started to run and you're sending me up a hill. But the thing is, when you can train on hills, it's a very mental thing. You can say, I've done this before. I've done this a million times. This is just like that one hard training day that I knew I was going to have, and you pull from the pain bank and you go out and you do that run, and it's because it's something you've done before. So when we talk about fartleks, that is essentially what you're doing to replace hills if you don't have hills in your neighborhood. Intervals, and when I talk about an interval, right, a fartlek is a short sprint with recovery intervals. An interval is simply the term that we use for in between hard sessions of work. So HIIT routines are, highly anaerobic, recovery. Highly anaerobic, recovery. A fartlek is sprint, recovery. Sprint, recovery. And you're going anaerobic, which is another term I'm talking about. I will talk about anaerobic in a minute here. But again, so intervals are just about sections of training that you do one after another without a break or without interruption. I've talked about hill repeats, but again, a hill repeat is when you have an available hill near you. It doesn't have to be a huge hill. It could be something that's only, elevation of 30 feet and maybe, 100 yards long. It's still a hill. You can still use that hill to do repeats on to build muscle strength in your legs. Hill repeat is just that. You're going up, you're coming down. You're going up, you're coming down. And then heel striking. So when you're running, if you're landing on the ground like this, that's heel striking. If you're landing on the ground on the ball of your foot like that, that's more what we're looking for in the sense of a stride. You want to be leaning forward when you're running and landing on the balls of your foot right here, not the heel. But you can see these are my Ironman shoes, my race shoes from Cozumel, And the reason why I selected these, I don't know if you can see them, they've got holes. And I knew that it was going to be a really, really hot race. So I selected this shoe from K-Swiss because of the drainage. And my feet never got blistered because I wore those shoes and I knew they were going to be soaking wet from all the water and whatnot I was pouring on my head to try to get some relief from the heat. And even in the rainstorm we were in, again, my feet were never sliding around in my shoes because there was very little cushioning. They were very minimalist shoes and they had lots of drainage, so the water never sat there. It always got squished out. All right, so we talked about heel striking. Let's talk about aerobic endurance. And we're going to make a distinction between aerobic and then heart rate zones, and then we'll get into anaerobic. So aerobic endurance is this. Your maximum heart rate is 220 minus your age. That's the math. Your aerobic zone is 220 minus your age times 0.6 or times 0.8. That zone between 60 and 80% is your aerobic zone. If you go over your aerobic zone, meaning you're going above 80%, now you're getting into your anaerobic zone. Now, why does this matter? Well, there's something called the 80-20 rule, and I'm going to get into this in a second as well. When you're training for Ironman, you're going to spend 80% of your time training in the aerobic zone, 20% of your time training in the anaerobic zone. So aerobic simply means that you're working hard enough that you're breathing heavily, but you are also able to carry on a conversation with the person beside you, if you get what I mean. Not like a long, casual conversation like this, but I can talk to you because I'm running and we can have a conversation type of thing. When you are getting into, let's talk about, I got these listed out, so I'm going to try and go in order here. So that's aerobic endurance, is that 60 to 80% of your maximum heart rate. Anaerobic zone, as I mentioned, is above 80%. Now, if you think about anaerobic, think about sprinting down the street, right? As soon as you start sprinting, you immediately shoot up into the anaerobic zone, and it's self-regulating. You can only go so far until your body tells you to stop. And usually, if you're lucky, you can go for 100 meters and your body says, slow down because I can't do this anymore. That's when you know you're in your anaerobic zone, you're going at maximum effort. When it comes to aerobic, you can keep going for hours and hours and hours at the same pace. That's kind of what you're trying to do as an Ironman, is get to the aerobic state where you can go out and ride a bike for 6 hours or less at 30 plus kilometers and hold that and maintain that and be able to get off your bike and go run a marathon. So let's talk about heart rate zones. You're going to see that a lot. There's heart rate zones go from 1 to 5, and they correlate with what I just said with your anaerobic and your aerobic zones. So I'll put a chart up here on my either this side or this side, and it basically outlines the 5 zones and where they are. And essentially, when you're in zones 3 and 4, or 2 and 3, 3 and 4, you're kind of in the aerobic space, and then anything 4 and 5, you're getting into the anaerobic zones. Now, I talked about the 80-20 rule for triathlon. You're going to hear that. That simply means you spend 80% of your time in the aerobic zone and 20% in the anaerobic zone. And again, I'll have a chart on one side or the other here that will show you what each zone represents as far as what percentage of your maximum heart rate. So that's the stuff to think about when you're running. Those are terms that you're going to hear in running circles and in triathlon circles. And if you didn't know what they meant, hopefully this video gave you a little bit of context. I will say this, I do not buy my running shoes from any large big box stores. I go to my local running specialty store. Shout out to Runner's Edge and the boys over there. They have been in business for, Benny's been in business now for probably easily 35 years, if not 40. They know how to fit you into the right shoe for the right, whether you're using their shoes for work or you're using your shoes to run or you're using your shoes for Ironman. They know how to provide you with the right shoes for the right way that you stride and walk. If you're in the right place, they're going to videotape you running so that they can see how you're striking the ground. They're going to recommend the right shoe to correct any inefficiencies. And is it inexpensive? No, it's not. But you're paying for the service of being injury-free and having the right footwear. And when you've been doing this as long as I have, I know exactly what I buy. I know my exact shoe, and I go to Benny once a year and I buy my shoes from him. Usually after Christmas, once the sales are over or the big sales come in, and I get my shoes for the following year. So big shout out to Runner's Edge there, and Benny, you're doing a fantastic job. So that was some key items to deal with running and triathlon. Next, we're going to be getting into transition terms. That's going to be in video number 6. So we'll see you in tomorrow's video. Bye for now.